I'm Rodney Alsop. I'm founder of the MBA News Digest and your host for today's webinar. So welcome to the MBA News Digest webinar and podcast series. Today I'm joined by Viktoria Kish. Vicky is the founder and managing director of International Study Programs, or ISP. Now, let me give you just a little bit of background on Vicky. She was born in London to an English mother and a Hungarian father. Vicky's exposure to political and economic differences ignited what I would consider a passion for encouraging understanding and responsible leadership across geographic, economic, and cultural divides. And today there are quite a few divides. After heading international programs at a business school in the Czech Republic, she established ISP in 1999, setting up offices in Prague, London, and Hong Kong. Now, with 20 years of experience in international education, Vicky continues to be a passionate advocate for global and experiential learning, which leads us to today's webinar. When Vicky shared the survey results with me, I immediately thought that this would be a great topic for MBA News Digest subscribers. So Vicky, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today about how international residencies are impacting students' lives.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an exciting chat.
Good. Now, before we move on, I do want to point out one thing, that ISP is a sponsor of the MBA News Digest. And I want to emphasize the role of this podcast and webinar series for a second. This allows us to dive into things a little bit deeper than we would ordinarily do with an article. It also allows us to bring people on with experiences that are worth sharing. And today, I think the results of this survey is certainly worth sharing. And I think that you're going to get a lot out of it. One more self-promotion slide here before we take off on this venture. The MBA News Digest is a curation aggregation focused on GME program and curriculum management. I do write some management-related articles or program management-related articles. I also have a quarterly aggregation report that I share with subscribers. And I do some consultancies and workshops when requested. If you need to get in touch with me, you can reach me at the email address rgalsop@mbanewsdigest.com. And my website is www.mbanewsdigest.com, or you can catch me on Twitter. The focus of this conversation today is fourfold. One, we're going to discuss what aspects of the trip had the greatest impact among traveling students. Two, what motivated students before their trip, what motivated them to want to participate in a trip? And then what were their personal development aspirations? And then finally, and probably of most interest to most of the listeners today, is what are the tips for organizing an impactful international residency? Now, I'm going to cover a few slides, and Vicky's going to jump in when I go astray. And then toward the end of, probably in 4 or 5 slides, we'll basically jump into the meat of the presentation. I just want to give you a flavor for some of the data right now. First of all, the survey methodology. This was students that traveled with ISP between January 2016 and March of 2018. There were 15 questions. The respondents, there were about 337 respondents, and they were divided mostly, 41% were MBA students, 28% were executive MBA students, and 19% undergraduate, and then other master's degrees made up 7%, and then other was 5%. Vicki, I'm interested in the other. What were the others?
Oh, that's a very good question. So it would be, for example, corporate groups or groups which are a mix of different types of levels. So there wouldn't be one particular level involved in those traveling.
Okay, thank you. Now, here's the key findings. Now, first of all, it's not a surprise that international residencies do have an impact. But from a big picture standpoint, this is a useful argument using this data to keep international residencies in the curriculum. There is, in the US in particular, there is some challenges with offering international residencies, particularly in the part-time MBA programs and the online MBA programs. This data, this particular response area could be used to argue for including the international residency in the curriculum. Now, the study trips, we also know that one of the objectives is cross-cultural awareness, but we sometimes forget that we can plan activities that enhance cross-cultural awareness. But it is often after-hours experiences that foster a lot of the learning. So keep in mind that we're going to talk about some of the more planned cross-cultural awareness activities today. Third, it did highly impact students' self-knowledge, self-awareness. And the destination and the academic content, they're key motivators for students traveling, getting them to be interested in and wanting to participate in an international residency. And then further exposure and cultural awareness, as we all know, is key for the student's future, particularly today. Now, the impact on students' lives. Noteworthy here is the percent responses regarding cultural differences, I think. If you take a look across the board, the responses indicate that it improved their understanding of cultural differences. This becomes an important driver. Also noteworthy is jumping all the way down to the bottom is the responses regarding meeting people that still matter to me today. Now, Vicki, a question here around this.
Yeah.
Did any of these residencies provide students the opportunity, the residencies during this period, provide students the opportunity to work with other students or company employees in some type of project or activity?
Yes, that's a growing area for us. And with these particular students, they would have had several opportunities to meet peers either through networking events or through student-to-student activities. So we sometimes bring groups of students along to for an informal evening dinner of beers or something like this, to chat and exchange information and ideas and gain a better sense of each other's culture. But we also work on consulting projects, and we provide a special type of consulting project, which is for social enterprises. And that is, I think, where the significant impact comes in, and where people really get to know each other and get to know local people and local business owners a little bit more profoundly.
So if you were to do this survey again today, you would probably see a bump in these numbers?
I would imagine I would hope to see a bigger increase in the MBA specifically, because we are working very hard to improve the networking opportunities and the consulting project opportunities that we're offering to them. So yeah, I would say that would be a growing trend.
Okay. The motivations to travel, decision factors when choosing the international residency overall. What caught my attention here was how much of a difference the destination selection made.
Yes.
It's certainly. Now, in terms of the academic content, the classmates and the relevant, and the faculty member professor, you really have not a whole lot of control over that. Is that correct?
That's right. So I would say classmates and faculty member or professor, we have no control over at all. relevance to career would really be based on the type of content that we work with professors to design and to provide for the groups. So it's really a question of whether that's a part of the learning objective for the group in the first place. But the destinations and the academic content, that is much more within our sphere of influence, let's say. We don't always make the decisions 100%, of course. But I think it's also important to note that these are the motivations. So it's prior to travel. So students are attracted by destinations which typically are very different to their home environment. China is obviously extremely popular, but Prague and Cape Town are also up there as being significant destinations for our students to travel to. And I think that those are attractive because of their relevance and because of the difference the contrast that they provide.
I'm not quite sure how to frame this, but when we start talking about planning an international residency, in the best of all possible worlds, how far out do you like to become involved?
Well, I would say from a practical perspective, it would be at least 4 months. Obviously, the more time we have to work with the program directors or the faculty, the more carefully crafted the program can be. So we'll have an opportunity to collaborate on more dynamic formats or different types of objectives. But from a practical, just putting the program together perspective, we need 4 months, that ideally.
Okay. But the more time, the better.
Always, yes.
Okay. The other part of this is, as I see from this slide standpoint, we've got a program director or leader, we've got a faculty, and in this case, you all involved. Is it more of a partnership in designing this residency today than ever before?
Absolutely. The collaboration between those three stakeholders that you mentioned is absolutely critical. And increasingly, we're seeing that students also want to be involved in the design process in a collaborative way. And I think that brings us another element to it, another dimension, which improves students' buy-in. But that understanding of what the learning objectives are and how they're best served is absolutely critical to the success of the trip. It can't just be go to Prague and you'll figure it out. It has to be structured in a deeper way for the students to gain as much as possible from the experience. Okay.
Well, let's jump to the personal development aspirations for a second. So key to all of the groups, education levels, the MBA, executive MBA, and so forth, key to all were international exposure, cultural awareness, and leadership skills. Now, in terms of leadership skills, is this a specific learning objective, or is this an unintended consequence of an international residency?
Those are two slightly separate questions. So let me just frame this question. The way that we asked it was about, where do you want to go from here in terms of your personal development? So leadership skills, I think there's been so much about the future of work and what that means to be a leader within the new environment that we're dealing with. And so I think business students are increasingly aware of needing a skill set to help them navigate through several different careers, be more resilient, be more adaptable. So I think this leadership skills is something that is on the forefront of their minds, and especially with the executive MBAs, really looking to move up in their career and really capture the benefits that their executive MBA has given them and apply them into the workplace in a much more immediate fashion. obviously undergrads have a longer road ahead of them traditionally. Right. So they're looking at, they tend to be looking at gaining a broader skill set, whereas executives are looking at, leading in this new environment and how to navigate through all of these different cultural, technological issues that they're going to be leading their teams through.
Okay. One of the things that in terms of the educational level aspirations that surprised me very much was the technology and IT. Now, is this from the perspective of the way companies are using it?
I don't think so. We didn't dig into that within the survey, but just anecdotally and based on the sort of evaluation surveys and my own discussions with some students, I think it's much more about leveraging that information, that skill set for their own businesses. So we're seeing a radical, if I go in front of a group and I ask undergraduates or MBAs what do they want to do when they finish school, a vast increase in the number of students who want to establish their own businesses. Okay. And I think that the IT set is around how to leverage technology to build their own career or careers.
Okay. Then in terms of the hands-on experience, is it about the cultural side of it, or is it more than that?
I think that there has been, in the 20 years that we've been running these programs, there's been a fundamental shift in the way that students learn and the way that they react to education. And obviously not my phrase, but one that's well used is that, we've gone from the sage on the stage to much more student-led learning and experiential learning. So I think this means learning by doing. Students rely these days, younger students especially, rely much more on their own experience and what they observe and feel themselves. And then they would perhaps refer back to the academic knowledge as a sort of backup, if you like, rather than being presented with the academics first and then seeing it applied. It's almost reversed itself, that they'd much rather kind of figure things out for themselves and then double check their assumptions against the academics. So I think this is really what they're talking about. They don't want to sit in a classroom for 45 minutes or an hour. They want to be out and doing, which is wonderful and a great way to learn, especially within an international trip context.
But this puts a lot of pressure on the team of people that's planning this and executing this.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It's really important to the work prior to departing and landing in country is absolutely vital in ensuring that everything on the ground is relevant, is exciting, is engaging for the students, and that they have an opportunity to learn, but also to realize what they're learning in real time. So that time to reflect, that time then to apply their own thoughts and their own opinions to what they've seen and what they've experienced is very important. And sometimes that conflicts with some people's idea of what an international trip should be. There's more sort of formulaic company visit, factory tour, cup of tea, bit of a chat, and move on. Though that model is now seen to be very old-fashioned. So we want to make sure that the students are as engaged as possible. And as we know, with millennials and with Gen Z, that's easier said than done.
Well, okay, I have to admit a major shortcoming of when I was managing programs. What I did was basically threw a class of students over the wall to you all. And basically said, here's generally what we would like to do it. But what you're telling me is today, I really, as a program manager, I have to get the faculty involved, some of the students involved, and I have to really plan and really outline what we want to accomplish and then help you figure out how to do it.
That would be optimum. Yes, that would give the best possible experience. Definitely, it's everything these days is much more customized. Students have different preferences. They have different ideas about what they want to achieve. And while we accept that we can't possibly be all things to all people all the time, I think it's important to work out the commonalities and to work out the priorities. So the priorities for the school, the priorities for the professor, the priorities for the program manager, and the priorities for the students. And then find a way to knit all of those things together so it's a really memorable, effective experience.
Let's transition to the tips. I think this is probably where a lot of the attendees today are looking. When we start talking about tips for organizing impactful international residencies, we were talking about it a little bit in the last two slides, is customize the study trip according to the student needs. Mm-hmm. So therefore, the faculty members and the program managers have to have a clear understanding of what they want the students to have and what the students' needs are.
Yes, exactly. At least very clear learning objectives. So if you consider the fact that you're taking a group of students halfway across the world in one direction or another for a full week, there's obviously a considerable amount of preparation going into that. There's money being spent, and there's a lot of time for the students. There's an opportunity cost involved, so it really needs to make sense. And we really need to feel that the students are prepared, they know what the expectations are, and that those expectations are delivered on. So, you know, if the main learning objective is to provide students with an opportunity to create a sense of better leadership as they go into their careers or as they continue along their careers, you know, stronger collaboration skills, for example, stronger cross-cultural communication skills, or just better self-awareness, then that needs to be highlighted. It could be as holistic an experience as the school decides, or it could be as specific an experience specific to one subject matter. But that needs to be determined ahead of time. And our team would need to have a very good comprehension of why those learning objectives were selected in order to be able to select the best speakers, the best visits, and the best experiences, the best hands-on experiences for the students.
Okay, let's talk about an intriguing destination. At least a lot of the students that I've taught over the years, any international destination would have been intriguing to most of them. I'm assuming that today, because we have students with far more experience, both internationally and domestically, that intriguing is much more of an issue, and in trying to define what intriguing is.
Yes, that's absolutely right. I think there are places and obviously it all depends where the students are from. So for our American clients, Asia tends to be still quite exotic, I would say. But there are obviously very strong and important lessons to be learnt within Europe, and certainly within the European Union right now. There's a lot going on that could be relevant and could impact the students' future careers. For our Australian clients, they are very tied to Asia, very keen to explore Asia as deeply as possible, because it's part of the national strategy to tie much more closely with China and with other Asian economies. So different countries, different regions will have different priorities and different stories that they want to tell. But as I mentioned before, the intrigue part is something that's very different. So that I think that the fundamental message that students are receiving is that not everybody thinks the same way. And when you're dealing cross-culturally, you have to recognize that different perspectives need to be considered. And so the bigger the shock in that, the better the lesson is taught, I would say.
Now, in terms of giving students a chance to reflect, is this a daily programmed activity, or is this reflection after they get back, or is it both?
It's both. I am personally a huge advocate for having 15 to 30 minutes daily just to get the group together. It doesn't have to be a formal environment. It can be before dinner or just in the hotel lobby or anywhere that you're comfortable. And to really debrief the day. What was surprising? What went well? What is still confusing for you, or perhaps a little bit mysterious? Where do you need help? Are you struggling with understanding certain concepts, or are there questions that are now coming to the surface that didn't come to the surface during that visit or that presentation, for example? And I think that by including this group learning moment where students can share their perspectives and share their different ideas and conclusions about what they've seen, together with the professor's leadership, it really enriches the experiences. It becomes multifaceted. You're seeing all sorts of dimensions to the same input. And that just really rams the message home that there are so many different ways of looking at a certain situation and reacting to it. And I think that helps the students not only process what they've learned for themselves, but also develop their own flexibility.
Now, is the reflection documented in any way? Do any of the programs use journaling or anything along those lines?
Yeah, so most of the programs have certainly different types of academic requirements. They all usually require a paper, but we also have clients that require students to do a blog or a video log of their journey, to have a personal reflection journal, to work perhaps in groups, to come together on some conclusions which include your personal development as well as the business potential of the area that you visited. So I would say that that's an increasing trend. And there are some clients already that do build in these debrief sessions, and that is requirement, and it's part of the academic credit. So it's certainly becoming a more popular way to finalize the information that people are absorbing.
Now, I don't know about the appropriateness of this, but that would seem like if they were documented in some way, a rich source from promotional materials for the next residency if you were recruiting to fill a residency in an elective course.
Well, we would love for that to happen. We do have clients that use students who have use is probably not a great word, but they do bring students into class to talk about the experience that they've had in country, to talk about the international exposure, to talk about the cross-cultural awareness that they've gained. And certainly that kind of word of mouth would be is invaluable. And if students are happy to share their journals, or presumably if it's a blog, then it is public, then I think it's a great idea to link to that. If students are interested in signing up for an elective, then their peer experiences are absolutely invaluable.
Okay. Now, choosing a partner, I'm going to pick on one word in that phrase there, partner. When I was doing this type of work, when I was a program manager, recruiting MBAs and so forth, we viewed someone like ISP as a vendor. What I'm hearing and what I'm seeing right now, and have talked to other program managers around the world, it's now a partnership.
Yeah.
So when we talk about a partnership, we're talking about evaluating and making sure that this partner organization is a fit for us as program managers, as faculty, and as students. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I think it's a mutual learning experience. We have obviously 20 years of experience, and see 4,000 to 5,000 students every year. So we're happy to share what we've learned through those experiences, and then to hear from our partners' side, what works within the values of the university, within the strategic objectives of the business school, and within the learning objectives of the specific professor, as well as the motivations of their students. And I think understanding each other allows us to work together a lot more closely, and overcome any challenges that arise along the way. That it's definitely the stronger the bond, the easier it is to execute brilliant programs.
That just triggered, I've made a note here that a webinar that we may want to do in the future with several of the providers of international trips is to put a panel together to have a conversation about the transition from vendor to partner, and have a conversation around what that has all meant and how things have changed in the last 4 or 5 years. Marketing collaterals. Once again, a shortcoming when I was doing this type of work was we didn't really market the program. It was a required course, required component of the course. So we basically said, you're going to go here, and here's the way we're going to do things, and so forth. But what you're telling me now is that marketing collaterals for setting student expectations and increasing elective student study trip enrollments is a necessity.
Yes, we are seeing a big shift from mandatory programs to elective programs. And in response to that, we feel that there is a very strong need for students to understand what they're getting themselves into, because the trip is no longer seen as just part of their MBA, for example, or executive MBA course payment, but as a separate and additional cost. So in order to appeal to students, there needs to be very strong incentive, not just the academic credit, but also the true value of the trip. So the networking opportunities, the career opportunities, as well as the personal development opportunities need to be emphasized throughout the planning process and throughout the enrollment process. And getting students engaged in that is also important, perhaps as part of the decision-making process, or in terms of, if you're planning a trip to Vietnam, for example, and you have a strong Vietnamese student contingent, bring them into a classroom, have a Q&A about Vietnamese culture or what to expect when visiting Vietnam. Similarly, if there is a local business person who works within that culture, to bring them in and explain, why it's important, or why it's a dynamic place, or why it's interesting. And I think students really respond to that, as well as very clearly what they will be getting for their money on a very practical basis.
Okay. Now, as you recall, we sent out a pre-webinar survey and got quite a few responses to that survey.
Yes.
So I would like to go through a few of those questions while we're on this slide, because I think most of them fit in this arena right now. One of them that several people commented on, and it was a concern, was student safety. So
yes.
How do you plan for, and what do you do about student safety in that context?
It's a many-leveled approach. So at the very basics, we obviously keep track of any travel warnings or security advisories that are coming from the US embassies. We share this information regularly with our clients. We keep them updated on any developments, answer any questions that they might have. Of course, we've traveled to all of the destinations that we take students, so we're happy to share our personal views and our personal experiences as well. Beyond that, we have emergency planning procedures in place. We are all trained on first aid, for example. We all have very clear advice on how to deal with sudden and unexpected situations which may occur. All of the students are registered with the US Embassy, so if there is an emergency or some form of disaster on the spot, then the US Embassy knows where they are. And of course, we carry significant travel insurance, liability insurance, so you're covered from that perspective as well. Of course, when it comes to safety, the more regular issues that we tackle are things like minor crime, pickpocketing, or perhaps student health issues, maybe catching a bug or falling over, spraining an ankle, something like that. Our guides and our program managers are all trained to deal with that, so that we know that which hospitals to go to. We know the English-speaking staff. We can take care of students from the minute anything happens until they're ready to go home.
Okay. This was a theme through many of the responses to the survey, the pre-webinar survey, managing student expectations.
Yes.
So the bullet that we have on the slide sets student expectations, but going beyond that and managing student expectations. Any suggestions?
Keep it simple, I think is the number one piece of advice. International travel can trigger a lot of amazing thoughts and ideas, and I think it's important to keep keep a level head and to keep a lot of realism in the room. So if you're planning to, for example, go for a very, very full schedule, 3 or 4 visits a day, for example, which some of our clients opt for, then students need to be aware that it's going to be packed. They're only going to have a very limited amount of time for personal time, for shopping, for sightseeing, for calling home, that sort of thing. And I think what students are most interested in, and we do a lot of pre-trips, so we go to visit our clients and talk to the students about how a trip feels and what it looks like on the ground. And I think the thing they're most interested in is what time do they need to be up and ready to go? What's the structure of the day? What are the expectations in terms of asking questions and participation rates? What are we going to eat? This is, students are very keen to understand the day-to-day nitty-gritty of what's going to happen on the ground. So it's important to have a clear idea before you speak to students, and then to set those expectations. And increasingly, we would ask that the expectations be set around participation, the amount of preparation that students need to do before they depart, the amount of knowledge they're expected to bring with them, and how they are going to be assessed for their grade is absolutely vital. So that the behavioural expectations are also just as important as as presenting the timetable and the logistic expectations that they could have.
Okay. Another comment came in that relates to creating an impactful experience. How would you define an impactful experience for students?
If there's a wow, then I've done part of my job, basically. I would like students to come away questioning more than they had even when they arrived. So why does it work like this? How does that happen? How do I deal with it? What does it mean for my company, myself, my country? What does it mean for opportunities for perhaps me and my family, or for my career? I really want that sudden engagement, that coming alive that you can see when students really sort of suddenly go, oh my gosh, wow, I would not have expected that. This is incredible. And to go back and to speak to people about it. So we've worked with many students who are leaving their state even for the first time, getting their passports specifically to come on an ISP trip. And I do remember distinctly one time we were in India, and there was a student who just categorically refused to try any of the local cuisine. And by the end of the trip, he was wolfing down vindaloo, which is the hottest possible curry you can get, and loving it. And similarly, we had a student that went to Brazil and went to visit a factory there, and he was in production as operations management, and sort of he blagged himself an interview on the spot because he just decided this is where he wanted to be, and he fell in love with the country, he fell in love with the culture, he loved the company we were visiting. So these things which can't always be planned for, but they're so wonderful when they happen. They really have a significant impact on somebody's life in that way, not just in life-changing moves from one country to another, but also just in the way that they perceive differences. I feel that is the biggest value that we can add, and the best impact that we can have.
Okay. Another comment related to describe how you all identify potential speakers, and how do you ensure that there's high quality associated with a particular visit or a particular speaker?
It's a very good question. Obviously, we've had 20 years of networking, so we have developed very close relationships with, I think, 5,000 active speakers and another 20,000 contacts who support those speakers. So we've got a very clear idea about the best topics for the speakers that we're engaging. But beyond that, I think it's the quality component can be subjective. So what we look for, obviously, is style and content. So we want a speaker that's going to be energetic, but is also going to deliver their knowledge in an engaging and relevant way that is understandable for students. Is going to want to engage with the students, going to want to answer questions, and cares about the student experience while they're talking to them. But beyond that, one sort of tip I would suggest here is that quite often we get requests to visit, Fortune 500 companies and to get into the C-suite and to talk to very high up people within these obviously enormous and influential companies. And I would say that it's possible to do that. Of course it is, but it's not always the best presentation, because these are people who speak constantly. They share the same story over and over again. And I think actually what really works for students is when they get to ask the questions that are important to them and important to their learning objectives. And so you want somebody who's going to be flexible and who's really going to be able to consider things from all sorts of perspectives, from the student side as well as their own company side. So we talk to speakers. We have an ongoing relationship with them. We always outline the group, the nature of the group, the nature of the topic. We talk about where it fits within their curriculum, whether they're MBA students or executive MBA students. So the speakers really understand where the students are coming from prior to saying yes or no to presenting to them. And I think that helps make sure that all the students, the program manager at the university, ISP's reputation, and the speaker's time are all protected and well served.
Okay. How about creating balance between leisure and professional or program time for the students? How do you strike that balance?
I'm not sure that we always have control over that ourselves. Students always find various ways to maximize their leisure time. But as I've suggested, I don't think a fully packed schedule is the way to go. I think 2 or 3 events a day and then half a day off, or a later start one morning, is a reasonable way so that students can really absorb what they're learning, especially if that has the debrief element to it as well. The behavioral side of things, students like to go out. They sometimes usually behave themselves, sometimes they don't. So there has to be, again, an expectation that this is a professional trip and that students should be prepared and show up professionally. But we like to include some structured cultural time. So we'll organize a foodie tour, for example, or a scavenger hunt, something like that, but also give them a few hours just to decompress from the group. to have their own space, to have a little bit of peace and quiet is really important. So, I would suggest half a day off a week for just general downtime or optional cultural activities that they want to engage in.
Okay. Now let's talk about student assignments for a second. Pre-trip, during the trip, and post-trip. Now we've talked a little bit about the engagement and the reflection time and so forth. But is there kind of a rule of thumb about prepping the students for the trip, asking them to do something during the trip as an assignment, and then when they get back, something that's a post-trip assignment?
The rule of thumb is that those things exist. The nature of those things is extremely varied. With regard, if you're asking me about best practice, I did survey some of the ISPers to ask, in their experience, which clients do they think do it best? And we've got clients who engage the students right from the start. So, for example, we would prepare 2 or 3 proposals for different destinations. The students then break into groups. They have to research each destination, and then they have to pitch their chosen destination to the rest of the class, and the class votes. So everybody's engaged in the selection process. They know a little bit about the country before they even start on the work. And then on the ground, that same client will make the students responsible for their own behavior. So it's almost a sort of peer pressure to behave. So students are graded on their participation, the quality of the questions, not the quantity. It's important to differentiate. How well they support the group, are they a valuable member of the team? Do they help out when needed? We even had a client, I remember a few years ago, who gave out prizes at the end of the trip for, most valuable contribution and, most reliable student, or, best question. And although it's playful, it really makes a difference in terms of general behavior. Post-trip, as I've mentioned, there's usually a paper which is in direct relation to the course topic. So if global business strategies is probably one of our most frequent courses that we deal with. So they may have been set a separate assignment to say, this company based in California is considering going out to China. What do they need to be aware of? What would you advise as a consultant, for example? Mm-hmm. Or what, looking at the sort of economic risks and advantages in investing in Indonesia. So there will be a normal sort of set paper, which is usually also done as a group. Okay. So there are multiple ways of doing it, but definitely holding them accountable in terms of behavior and participation, as well as academic output works really well.
In that context, do you all have an expectation that on any given residency trip that there is a representative from the program's administration, leadership, management side, the faculty side, those two sides? Do you want them represented on these trips?
Yes, definitely. Trips that provide a professor and an administrator traveling, I think, are the best anchored. You've got the academic content, you've got the constant learning, as well as the sort of pastoral support, let's say, and the reminder that there is an expectation there of a certain obligation on the part of the students to participate and to behave and to represent the school well. I think it works really well when there's a faculty and an administrator, but some schools just send one faculty, other schools tag team their faculty. So you'll have 2 faculty traveling with 1 lead, and then the second person leads the trip the following year. So there's multiple ways to do it, but you definitely need adult presence. That's absolutely 100% sure.
I notice you didn't say adult supervision here.
You can only do so much.
Right. Now, there is always an opportunity for a student to be disengaged. Is there a way to, what have you found that works that keeps students engaged throughout the entire trip?
This is changing, I would say. So in the last couple of years, the feeling of involvement is really important. So that ownership, feeling ownership for the trip is really important for student engagement. Understanding why they're there, understanding what the potential is for them to acquire in terms of knowledge and self-development. If a student is disengaged on the trip, it is worth having a chat, separately, to understand what's going on for them and to figure out what the group can expect from them. It's almost impossible to change a student's behavior just by forcing them. From what I found these days, it's not enough to say you'll be sent home.
Right.
It's much more about personal attention. So if a student is disengaged, we try and figure out if it's just because they're not interested in that day's topic. Not everybody likes to see the inside of a car manufacturing plant, for example, or if it's a general attitude issue. And then, we're sort of, we try to work, or we try to understand from the administrator and from the student what the issues are. And if there's a way to make allowances, then we will. But we tend to try and focus on the positives, like this is the best that we can do with this group. Everybody else is having a good time, or they're engaged and they're passionate about what they're seeing. So just focus on the positives and hope that the students that are left behind start to catch up.
Okay. And as we're running close to the end of time here, let me ask you just one other question. Is there anything that you would like to add that would be a suggestion for any of our listeners that would make an international residency for them a complete success?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question to ask right at the end, Rodney.
And I realize that complete success may never happen.
Yes, I think, it's important to talk. It's just good to talk. Just keep it open, have a dialogue going, consider ideas, share the ideas with whichever vendor or partner you select. And I think it's critical to have a clear understanding of what it is that you would like to achieve. If you've said to me, what does impact mean for me? I can tell you fairly clearly, but what does it mean for you as the program manager for the business school, or for you as the professor? And what would it mean for the students? And, that's quite a complicated set of questions, but it makes such a difference. And just open communication and timeliness, and anything is possible.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and start wrapping this up. Now, folks, all of you on the call today, if you want a copy of the report, you can take your phone camera and place it on the QR code here, and that will take you to a place that you can download this report and get the results. With that in mind, Vicki, I really, really appreciate your time. This has been great for me. I've enjoyed it very much.
No, thank you so much. So have I. I've got a lot. You've given me a lot to think about as well.
Okay.
Hope maybe there'll be a follow-up.
Okay. We can do that, I think. All right, folks. May the 7th is the next webinar. Have it scheduled at 1 p.m. I've got Nikki James coming in from Practera. They are a project-based experiential learning platform developer. And we're going to talk quite a bit about the metrics associated with designing and measuring the performance of experiential learning and some of the things along those lines. At the same time, I want to thank you for attending. And once again, Vicki, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and time today. Have a great day. And as always, you can email me at rgalsop@mbanewsdigest.com. Thank you for listening.